What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the new slug shotgun first in last out, and we will be breaking down how to get this weapon in this video, breaking down the best perks and overall god roll, the DPS and damage output of this weapon, and finally a cool build I made with this shotgun. And overall I think this is one of the best special weapons in the game right now, and by the end of the video I'll try to convince you why I think that is. So first, how to get this weapon. If you do the weekly quest where you visit the 4 planets, you'll be able to get an engram after each step. Then by the time you're done with that entire quest line, you can then focus any umbral into this one right here, which comes with the first and last out shotgun, then also the Achilles SMG, both of which are extremely strong, so this is definitely worth grinding out until you get a god roll for both of them. So now breaking down the perks on this weapon, in the left slot, which is the barrels, you can pretty much use wherever you want. I just use the higher range option of the two I have, but it doesn't really matter that much, so use whatever you really need. But then in the magazine slot, you're going to want to have assault mag, which is the only one that will increase the rate of fire by 5 RPM, which is going to be a direct DPS increase. So looking at what this perk actually does, first without it shooting off one magazine, so 6 shots, that takes 4.538 seconds. Now if we go ahead and get assault mag, it should be a little bit quicker, shooting off that 6 shots once again. Now taking only 4.154 seconds, so that's roughly an 8.5% increase rate of fire, which is also to increase the DPS by 8.5%. Now looking at the perks on this weapon in the left slot, there's going to be 3 perks I want to include in this video. First, auto loading holster, slide shot, then also pulse monitor. All 3 of these perks are going to be pretty similar in what they do, but achieve it in very different ways. So first with auto loading holster, where the holstered weapon is automatically reloaded after a short period of time. And this perk's going to work really well for just general gameplay with this weapon. Whenever you get up to a major or ultra, you're going to be able to shoot it. Then once the enemy's dead, you can pull out your primary and use your primary for red bars and clear out the rest of the room. Then by the time you need it again, it's ready to go and fully reloaded. Also, this perk's going to pair really well with Anarchy for boss damage. You can shoot off one entire magazine, re-stick the enemy with 2 Anarchy, then wait for auto load and holster to proc. You can hear the little noise, then pull out your shotgun and go again. Up next will be pulse monitor, which will be another way to reload the weapon. This time, every time we become red bar, even when the weapon is stowed, it will reload the entire magazine from reserves, which is once again pretty good for just general play. As you're using the weapon, you'll eventually become red bar as long as you're not using something like Devourer, and more often than not, you won't have to reload this weapon. But the downside of this perk is it's going to be hard to do it on boss fights when you actually want it to work, so it's not going to really have a huge increase for boss fights. And then finally, the last perk on the left side I want to look at is going to be slide shot, which is going to be every single time we slide, we get 1 bullet back from reserves. Then it also boosts the range and stability. So this is yet another way to avoid reloading with this weapon. Every single time we slide, you'll get 1 ammo back. There is a slight cooldown on this perk, so you can't spam it. But for just general play in PvE, once again, if you just slide between all the enemies you have to shoot, you should be good to go and never have to reload. But once again, this won't necessarily help for boss fights. Before we move on to the right column perks on this weapon, look at the base damage on Greg. It's 23,380. Now looking at the rate of fire of this weapon over 1 mag with assault mag, as we showed off earlier, it's going to be that 4.1 seconds. Meaning the base DPS of this weapon over 1 mag is just under 34,000, which is actually really good for a special weapon, and we're not even using damage perks yet. Then for 2 magazines, there's going to be 2 different options. The first one will be shoot the entire magazine, and then reload the entire second magazine at once and shoot it off just like the first magazine. So shoot 6 shots, reload 6 shots, then shoot 6 again, and that took 11.078 seconds. But now what we can do is once we get through the first magazine, we can reload cancel the next 6 shots to get to 12 shots total like we were before. And this will actually be a lot quicker because of the fact that the rate of fire is pretty much the same as the reload speed. And with that option, the DPS over 2 magazines still stays at 30,686, which is extremely good for 2 magazines of a special weapon. Then for the right column perks, there's going to be 3 I want to talk about in this video: Demo, Vorpal, then also Surrounded. So first, looking at Surrounded plus Surrounded spec, this will be the highest buff on this weapon, and all you'll need is 3 enemies nearby, and this makes the weapon do 32,732 on Greg, which is a lot for a special weapon, and will be that 40% increase that Surrounded usually is, meaning the DPS over 1 magazine is 47.5 thousand, then over 2 magazines still 43,000, which is pretty much up there with most of the heavy weapons in the game. But obviously you won't be able to have Surrounded on every boss fight, so we can use Vorpal instead, and also pair this with Major / boss spec. I'm using Major because Greg is counted as a Major and not a boss, but for most bosses you would obviously be using boss spec. 28,976, which is still going to be a 24% increase over the base damage, and we're going to have that at all times on boss fights, meaning the DPS for 1 mag is 42,000, then over 2 mags it's 38,000, which I can't stress enough is extremely good for a legendary special weapon. Then the final perk I want to show off in the right column will be Demolitionist, which is going to help us get our grenade back, then also throwing our grenade will reload it from reserves. And once again, we have major spec on this variant, which is going to hit 25,197, which means the DPS over 1 mag is only 36,500. I say only, and that's still better than pretty much every other special in the game. But then over 2 magazines, what we can do instead of reloading is throw a grenade to reload the entire second mag and then shoot it off. But this is actually going to be slower than just reload canceling, as you see, meaning the DPS doing that will be 31,000, which is going to be way lower than just shooting off 2 magazines with Vorpal and reload canceling. Also, this weapon holds 16 ammo with no reserve perks, which means 463,000 total damage output with Vorpal, then all the way up to 523,000 with Surrounded. So not only does this weapon have really good DPS, it also has really good sustained damage. So overall, the god roll in this weapon will be Assault Mag, plus auto-loading holster, then Vorpal Weapon, or Surrounded. And Vorpal is going to be really good for pretty much every single boss fight in the game. Then for situations such as ad clear, then also some boss fights that you can be surrounded will be a little bit higher DPS. But both options are extremely good, among the highest DPS of all legendary specials in the entire game. Then on top of that, you can pair this with Anarchy as usual, which means the DPS will go up to 56,500 with Vorpal over 1 magazine. And over 2 magazines, it will still be 52,500, which is really good. Add in Weapons of Light and also a debuff, and we're talking nearly 100,000 DPS with this combo. So as we've shown, the shotgun is extremely good for DPS and total damage output, so I decided to make a really cool build with it, using some stuff we haven't used in quite a while, starting off with Felwinter's Helm, which is going to be the exotic warlock helmet, where when you get a final blow with a charged melee or finisher, you'll emit a burst of energy that weakens enemies. And the higher the tier the enemy is, the bigger the radius of the energy is, and also how long the debuff lasts. And we're going to use that with Middle Tree Void Walker, which is Nova Warp, mostly for Dark Matter, which will give us health and ability energy back on every single Void ability kill. And the first mod we're going to be using in this build will be Heavy Handed for 2 reasons. First, while Chargeable Light, using our charged melee will give us half our melee back. Then also the second part of the mod, while surrounded by multiple enemies, defeating a combatant with a shotgun will add ammo to the reserves. So to make that mod work, we need to become Charged with Light, and we're going to be using this one right here, Sustained Charge, which will allow us to become Charged with Light with rapid kills with auto rifles. And we're using this one because we're going to be using our favorite swashbuckler auto rifle, whichever one it is. I'm using the Iron Banner 1. And on this, we're going to be using anti-barrier rounds and pairing that with Breach Resonator on our chest piece, which will be yet another way to get all of our abilities back even quicker. So there's a lot going on there, but the general idea behind this is pretty much to use your AR to become Charged with Light. Then you use your melee charge to debuff all the enemies nearby. Then also with Heavy Handed plus Dark Matter on Middle Tree, you get your melee back very quickly, pretty much in 1 melee kill, which means you can pretty much do that combo forever. Then since we're going to be up close and personal, we're going to be using Surrounded on the shotgun, which means we'll be getting that 40% buff at all times, and also with Heavy Handed have infinite ammo. Then on top of that, every single time we use our melee and debuff all the enemies nearby, that's going to be a 30% debuff just like all the other debuffs in the game, and it's going to last very long depending on the tier of enemy that you kill. Then with Heavy Handed and Breach Resonator, we'll have our melee charge back pretty much instantly, which means we can do it again and rinse and repeat that combo over and over again pretty much forever. And the final mods we'll be using in this build will be Oppressive Darkness on our Bond for that debuff whenever we get up to a real boss. Then we have stacks on stacks, that way every single time we get a multi-kill with our AR, we get 2 stacks of Chargeable Light. Then finally, the last mod we'll be using will be Reactive Pulse, which is going to work really well because we're going to be surrounded by enemies all the time with this build. And every single time we take damage, it'll do a burst of arc energy around us and kill all the enemies for us. Then the second part of this mod, gain a powerful overshield while performing your finisher. That will pair really well with Felwinter's Helm because of the fact that every single time we get a finisher kill, it will proc the weakening effect, so we can finish enemies very easily and get an overshield while doing it. And finally, in our heavy slot, we'll be using Anarchy to pair with our first and last out shotgun whenever we get up to a boss fight. That way we have really good DPS and also really good total damage output. So overall, there was a lot going on in that build. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Pretty much the entire concept behind it is use your melee charge to weaken all the enemies nearby. Then between Heavy Handed and our auto rifle, which now has Swashbuckler ×5 from the melee kill, we'll get our melee charge back very quickly, which means we can pretty much do that forever and weaken all the enemies nearby. Then whenever we get up to a major or ultra, we have our shotgun to easily kill them in 1 or 2 shots. So yeah, that build's really fun to use and actually really strong. But overall, first and last out is one of the best special weapons in the entire game right now for PvE. Its DPS numbers are pretty much unmatched when it comes to legendary special weapons, and its total damage output is really good also. And it's actually going to be usable versus most bosses in the game because of the fact that it has Vorpal, which will always be active. Then it also has more range than a standard shotgun because it's a slug. Then on top of that, if you have one person in your team use something like Divinity, it'll be very easy to hit those crit spots. That way you're taking advantage of the full damage of this weapon. So it's actually pretty easy to use compared to most shotguns in the game. So for all those reasons, this weapon's definitely worth grinding for. And yeah, I think that's gonna be it for the video. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.